So I'm very excited about this project as well, and it is very complicated. I was reading some of the comments to your post. You say you want to start with 4 icons, right? Why four? What are the four? Do you want to tell our audience?
Yeah, I think we're going to do some breaking news here, Yota.
Okay,
We,
I
we
love that. My first Voices of the Industry podcast and breaking news. That's
I like
exciting.
it. I like it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voices of the Industry, a podcast by the AI localization think tank, which aims to bring diverse voices from the industry in the conversation about AI and how it is impacting all of us and our work in this sector. And today we have with us Scott McCarthy, VP of Global Brand Protection at DreamWorks Animation, and one of Subtle's AVT heroes for 2025, Subtle being the Subtitlers Association in the UK. Scott, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I don't think there are many people in the media sector that don't know who you are, but our audience in the AI localization think tank are people from across the localization world, not just media. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with you, could you please introduce yourself, who you are, what is your background, and what does a VP of brand protection do?
All right. Thank you for having me. I've been at DreamWorks for about 20 years. Half of that was in marketing, which is where I really have my brand protection background. The other half of that is been in localization. And so, if you looked on LinkedIn, my title talks about global brand protection. That to me is the same as localization. I really connect those two things. I see localization as brand protection. When we are dubbing something, especially for DreamWorks, oftentimes we're bringing that IP to a country, to an audience for the very first time. And I'm a big believer that brand protection is all about that connection that you have with your audience. And so it really, for me, kind of elevates the work that we do and the responsibility that we have to establish that brand, to protect that brand, and to make sure that we, most importantly, protect that relationship with the audience.
Yes, I think brand protection is very relevant to localization as well. In fact, I was talking to a colleague the other day, especially now with the AI push and everything, and she was saying that localization teams should really partner up with legal and marketing teams because both of these teams are the best versed in understanding and talking about business risk as well when they get pushed by the C-level executives to push ahead with AI. And you have both of these skills as well in your profile, given your studies. So I guess that makes you the ideal person to talk about the value of localization. So let's talk about DreamWorks. It's the home to some of the most beloved franchises in the world. And you're responsible for making these stories work in dozens of languages. How does AI and AI dubbing specifically has started to enter the conversation for you?
I mean, it's the short answer is we don't do any dubbing in where we utilize AI tools. I'm trying not to use the word AI dubbing because it's just such a broad term and
Mm-hmm.
it has so many different meanings and it's so subjective and it gets overused. So in terms of dubbing where AI tools are applied, we aren't doing anything in that space. But it absolutely has entered the conversation. It's entered the conversation for every single studio. My colleague out of London, Alberto de la Puente, just
Mm-hmm.
did the Una podcast, and he talked about NBCU and DreamWorks, like keeping our finger on the pulse of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a good way to kind of describe how we're looking at it and the analysis that we're doing just to make sure that we understand where it's going, what it can do, what it can't do. There's a lot of content it is not ready for. And even if it is ready, there's bigger conversations about when you should use it, why you should use it, and for me, that making sure that that's a conversation you're having with your audience, with your consumer.
Yes, you're right. And actually, that's why everyone is having so many proofs of concepts, I suppose. But it's also, I think what the problem is how do you test as well exactly what is right with the consumer? And there's a lot of opinions about that.
Yeah. The testing will only show you what the tech can do,
Yes.
but it's not telling you what your audience wants and what they expect from you, and that is the part of the equation that often gets overlooked.
Yeah, and it's the hardest part. So the technology, you have seen how fast it moves, right? And I think we all agree that I will use the term AI dubbing in this conversation to mean dubbing that is performed with synthetic voices of some sort. Uh, just to clarify this for the audience. So, do you think AI dubbing, and maybe there's more AI in the process, but at least synthetic voices are there. So, do you think AI dubbing will ever reach the quality of in studio dubbing? Because I think we all agree that it hasn't yet. And if it does, do you think it will become the mainstream way of producing content?
The short answer to the first part of your question is yes, I think the technology will get there. The harder question of will it be rolled out, will it become some sort of standard, some sort of practice that a lot of studios are using? This is where I disagree with a lot of people who are driving this technology, but I do think there will be limits, and I think the consumer will determine where those limits are. I think that when it comes to, you know, what is considered premium content or really emotionally driven content, I do believe that consumers are going to advocate for, you know, more human agency behind that type of work, that type of content, that type of media. It may make sense in areas of social media or in YouTube or I don't know. There's a host of tiers
Sports,
within the
perhaps?
media. Yeah, sports, even some news, things like that. That's probably where we'll see adoption before we see it in any type of premium content. But you know, I'm a big advocate for you have to know the why. You have to be able to answer the question why. You can't, I believe you can't just use this technology just to save money. I think that you have to have reasons behind it. And in the localization space, that could mean, you know, you're able to take this to a market that you otherwise would not have been able to. You will now have a budget to expand that language list and to bring it to more audiences than you otherwise would have. You may have a market where there is no infrastructure for localization, and that's their only way to bring it to that audience. Those are answers to the why that I can understand, I can get behind, but it's a conversation that we need to have every time this technology is used.
Yeah, this is actually the positive way of looking at it, expanding the market basically, and the cost is exactly the opposite, which is also it also means shrinking the market in a way. Before I get back to your point about the audience, which is the most interesting thing, I wanted to talk about this, you know, levels of content. You mentioned premium, and then you also mentioned user-generated content, and there's this conversation that we're all having in the industry about this content pyramid that you've also blogged about. And of course, premium content is at the top and requires the highest possible quality, which is currently in studio dubbing. And as you said, in other areas, we already start seeing some adoption. How do you see DreamWorks catalog? Do you see all of it sitting at the top of the pyramid in a single premium blog, or do you see different content sitting at different levels of the pyramid, perhaps?
I mean, when it comes to our feature films and some of our premiere television series, like, yeah, I would like to think it's at the top of that pyramid where it's really protected, it's emotionally driven content, it's a type of stuff that consumers are going to really advocate to say, I don't want AI anywhere near that. But we also do have content where, you know, we have YouTube channels, we have tons of social media work that goes out. We have a preschool show where, you know, we'll put content to keep the engagement with the audience for, you know, in between seasons, and they're like toy play videos and unboxing videos, things that are very simple type of content with a single narration. There's no real kind of emotional arc to even the delivery. You know, I can see in terms of what the technology can do, absolutely, it can handle that type of content really well.
Have you started using it in that type of content so far, or?
We have not because I I want to get further along in how we communicate that to the audience. I think we need to progress in ways of disclosing where the tech is used and where it's not. And until we have a way that we can really have that conversation with our audience in a transparent way, I don't want to just put it out there and, see what people say or see what happens or try to, um, mitigate the blowback. I
Consequences.
think that's a conversation that needs to happen up front, not after the fact.
Yeah, well, this audience question, and what do the audiences care about? This is something you've discussed a lot. I also did a poll recently at the GCSE event in London and then online to see what people think that, if an AI dub was indistinguishable from a purely human one, would the audiences care? And in both cases that I ran this poll, the results were very, very eerie because the audience was like split exactly in the middle. Half of the people thought that the audience would care and the other half that they wouldn't. And I can see both sides. I want the audience to care. I would care myself, or my son would care because he's been hearing me talking about localization all his life. But I wonder, what do you, I know what your answer to your question, to this question is, but would you like to tell our audience and explain what do you think the audience will do in the future?
Yeah, it keeps coming up at these conferences I go to, panels that we're a part of. Yeah, you and I were on that panel where that very question was asked. I think Aaron at the GCSC had a really great point on a conversation we had recently where there's not a lot of data on it, and in part because we don't have means of really disclosing effectively how this technology is applied. A lot of times, if it is rolled out, it's buried in the fine print, it's put it in the metadata and the dub cards. We don't have that way to tell the consumer up front what it is they're about to watch. So when we ask the question, like, will the audience care? And a lot of people say, well, they're watching it anyway. I'm like, well, they're watching it because they don't know. So I think Aaron has a great point where we don't have a lot of data on it for that reason. You've heard me talk about my analogy to a museum, and this is me personally, but if I go into a museum and let's say I didn't know the artist and I'm really moved and inspired by the work and it gets me thinking and what gets me to want to create and to tap into my kind of artistic passions, and then I walk out of that museum and someone says, oh, by the way, all those paintings you saw, they were all made with AI. I would that would just that I would have a pretty negative reaction to hearing that news. But I get it. There's also people that will say, well, look, if art moved me, that's all that matters. I don't care how I got there, but it got me there. And I think the polls that we are seeing are showing that, yeah, there's two schools of thought on this. I was engaged in a conversation on LinkedIn with this, she's a graphic designer, Javi Altman, and she had compared it to diamonds. Now, bear with me, I'm not trying to get into we talk about the ethics of the AI industry. We don't, I'm not trying to open up another can of worms, which is the ethics of the diamond industry. But in terms of like, say, a diamond ring, she was making this point that you have natural, real diamonds and lab-grown diamonds. And to the human eye, you cannot tell the difference. But there is a lot of people out there, my wife being one of them, that cares very much how her diamond was made or where it came from. And, she made it very clear when we were having those conversations before getting married that I was not to buy a synthetic or lab-grown diamond. But that's another example where it's indistinguishable, in this case to the human eye, but it shows that there's a large segment of people, of consumers that truly passionately care about how something was made.
I, I think people generally care, especially when they know up front, right, as you said. I wonder, though, how much the factor of convenience and the factor of can you afford to care. Like, for instance, I don't know, there are some brands of clothes that are made in sweatshops and people do buy them because they are very cheap, even though they probably know how they're made. So this could be another analogy. So I don't know if how much the convenience factor will play out with respect to how or whether the audiences will care and what the reaction will be.
And it's a good point, and the economic side of it has to be factored in, absolutely. I look at myself and my own habits, and I come home from a long day of work sometimes, and I am drained. And then I'm dealing with like kids that are going crazy right before bedtime. I finally get them down, and like I'm wiped out. And at that point, I don't even care what I'm watching when I sit down in front of the TV. But at the same time, I'm not even given a choice because we don't have those disclosure mechanisms in place.
This is the conversation we were having at the last GCSE dubbing working group meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, so I keep going back to before we can really dive into that question and really have some meaningful topics, some meaningful conversations on it. I think we need more input from the audience, and that starts with transparency.
Yeah, that is the big topic. I know you feel very strongly about that. And at the last meeting that we had, someone was Tim Everett from the BFI, and the voiceover artist was proposing a classification system for AI-generated content in film and TV, similar, let's say, to the BBFC's age ratings. And then another member of the group was also suggesting about these dub cards, that they're moved to the front of the film rather than the end credits, as you said, where they're kind of buried today. So do you think that would do the trick? And who is responsible for making that happen is the other question as well.
Well, hopefully it can be me.
Okay, you could tell us about that then.
That's a bold statement. So I'm working with one of the most premier graphic designers in the world, James Bernard, and I'm still pinching myself that he agreed to partner with me on this project. But we're going to try to solve that very question, because the deeper you dive into these things, you get into those questions of like levels of AI and how do you communicate that, and how do you put a single icon up on the screen and have it tell you that full story. And we're coming up with some really creative ways to do exactly that. So I think there is a way to pull this off. I think there's a way to do it. And I'm really excited about this, and hopefully, I'm going to put this out there. If it can turn into some opportunities to, really lead in this space, 100%. I would love to be a part of something like that, because I'm so passionate about transparency and disclosure projects. But at the very least, the fact that it's hopefully going to just drive in what I feel is a very important industry conversation, that to me is already a huge
It's
win.
already a win. Yes, exactly. So I'm very excited about this project as well, and it is very complicated. I was reading some of the comments to your post. You say you want to start with 4 icons, right? Why 4? What are the 4? Do you want to tell our audience?
Yeah, I think we're going to do some breaking news here, Yota.
Okay, I
We,
love
the,
that. My first
so
Voices of the Industry podcast and breaking news. That's
I like
exciting.
it. I like it. Yeah, so we put out this post where I was really asking the localization community for feedback on this very question, and a lot of people were looking for some sort of kind of overarching badge that would say, no AI was used, or even something like, human made only. And when I really, looked at it, there's a lot of work being done in that area already. Like in Spain, for example, they have an AI logo with like the big red slash that's going through it. Or there's other forms of media, like in the publishing world, they have icons for books by people, and they have badges like that. So there's a lot of work being done around the world with various organizations, even local governments, where these kind of broader icons are already being addressed. So you have to remember that my project started with what was happening in the European Union with the AI Act, where they were coming up with a badge to say, AI was utilized, and you would have some identifying marker on there. But then it really was asking the consumer to go a level or a layer deeper to kind of research what exactly was used. And I just felt very strongly that we could communicate that level of detail of exactly what tools were used up front in a way where we didn't have to ask consumers to go out and to do more research on their own. So after going through all the comments, and trust me, I read every single one of them, and it was, incredibly helpful in coming up with this. But the final four icons, so this is where we're going to do some breaking news here, Yoda. The final four icons are actually going to be synthetic voice. We're going to have one for lip reanimation or any kind of face manipulation. This is the work that's often referred to as vubbing. And then we're going to have two badges or two icons for translations. So think of the text that is spoken, like the dialogue script, and then also text for what you see on screen. So this is going to be like your captions and your subtitles and your
Okay.
SDH files.
I see. That makes sense because it covers everything. Would that work then when you have subtitles into the same language, so that the ASR has been used, for instance, and modified by a person? Because that is the only area that I wonder whether you need an icon or not, since it's a black and white thing. Either the dialogue was said or it wasn't said.
The deeper you go into all of these, it opens up just a lot more creative challenges around, what happens when just some AI was used and there was a human involved, and opposed to something that was 100% made with AI. These get a little bit more complicated every time you kind of dive into it, but we have some creative solutions for that, and I think you'll have to have me back. I don't want to announce everything right here, so you're gonna have to have me back for more breaking news, Yoda.
So, do you have like a timeline for all of this? Because the European Commission's Code of Practice on marking and labeling AI-generated content was just published a couple of days ago. Haven't read it yet. And the transparency obligations of the EU AI Act are coming to force, I think, in August. I mean, is that like coincidental, or do you have a timeline that relates to it?
Yeah, I believe this podcast comes out in July, and I should have our icons ready to release in August. Creating the icons is actually the easy work. The hardest challenge is trying to get buy-in, trying to make these a standard in an industry that can't even agree on a naming convention. So
Yeah.
that's going to be where we really need to lean on organizations like the AI localization think tank, and a ton of associations that are supporting this industry and this community to really kind of get their buy-in and to kind of help get that message out there.
We would love to help. And if there is something that the audience of this podcast can do now even, I don't know if you need more feedback, more than you already have, please do let us know. So it's very good that we're scheduling to publish this interview in July. Basically, I love this initiative because it's great for everyone. It's not just good for the audience. It doesn't just serve the audience. It also serves the professionals, our entire industry. And you're not just reacting. You're taking action to shape what our future will be, which is what we are trying to do at the think tank as well. Give people the information so we can take action now that we can take action before our future is decided for us. And I want to ask you one last question. If you could change one thing about our industry and how our industry is approaching AI, what would that be? And what gives you hope for the future?
Well, I feel like I keep saying the same thing, but the thing I would change is all the work around transparency, or really getting studios and people that are responsible for putting out content to understand that you don't have to be afraid of disclosure, of transparency around this technology, and to actually understand the thing that it may do is build trust with your audience. And I think we're so afraid of a negative reaction that we just try to not even talk about it. But I think I think you can bring, if you have that conversation, if you answer those questions as to why this technology is being used, and you disclose when it's being used, you may be able to bring your consumers with you, because you're going to establish that trust with them. But I do think that is an area where I wish we were making more strides in that space, but that would be the thing I'd love to change. And the thing that gives me hope is the consumer. I really put a lot of trust in the consumer that they're going to, help us answer that question that we keep coming back to, which is if that content is indistinguishable, if AI content is indistinguishable from, traditional content or human-made content, does the consumer care? And I think we will get that answer. I think we'll get that answer soon.
I think so too, and I think, I mean, that what gives me hope in our industry is that I see a lot more honesty in all the conversations between the different parties, which actually strengthens that element of trust and for us to being able to do something all together. Thank you so much for your time, Scott, and for your sharing your thoughts with the think tank and your exciting news. I look forward to hearing more of your story. Thank you for being on Voices of the Industry in our podcast. We are honored, truly, to be the ones where you break your news. And thank you to everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Remember to like and subscribe. Bye, everyone.